Why does the book of Revelation seem so weird? Because God said it would be. And he said, "Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I the Lord will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Numbers 12 verses 6 through 8. God told Aaron and Moses that Israel's prophets would see visions and dream dreams. That command was never rescinded. Prophecy would be symbolic and metaphoric. So, if anybody says that prophecy has to be interpreted literally, they apparently haven't read the scripture. Unless a prophecy is specifically explained to be literal, it should be understood to be symbolic and not the other way around. Even the explanation of the prophecy should be assumed to be a metaphor. The book of Revelation is full of strange symbols and visions. This is why some might consider it weird. However, we can find many similarities with other parts of the Bible. The symbols in Revelation are not meant to be taken literally, but rather to convey deeper spiritual and theological truths. Each section in Revelation begins with a heavenly scene or messenger. The beginning of the 7 seals starts with a throne room scene with 24 elders and 4 beasts in chapters 4 and 5. There was lightning and thunder. The beasts were full of eyes and in the form of a lion, calf, man, and eagle, and each had 6 wings like the seraphim in Isaiah 6. Each beast will introduce one of the 4 horsemen who correspond to the opening of each of the first 4 seals in chapter 6. There is also a lamb with 7 horns and eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, who will open a scroll with 7 seals. Much of this description of the throne of God has been seen before in the Bible. In Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10, Ezekiel gave a description of the throne and strange beasts. There was fire and lightning. Ezekiel didn't see horses, but he saw strange wheels full of eyes that traveled around. These might suggest a chariot. Above these was the throne and the likeness of the Lord. In chapter 10, these living creatures are identified as the cherubim. The description of the beasts in Daniel 7 sounds much like the beasts in the later chapters of Revelation, particularly Revelation chapter 13 verse 2. Daniel 7 is often compared to the metal kingdoms in Daniel 2. However, Daniel also mentions the throne. Daniel 7 verse 9, "I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire." Daniel also mentions the wheels and fire like Ezekiel. As far as the beasts later in Revelation being similar to those in Daniel, the church historian Eusebius offered a spiritual interpretation of those in Daniel. The king likened the life of all men to a great image, but the prophet compared the great and mighty tumult of life to a mighty sea. And it was fitting that the king, who prized the substances deemed precious among men, gold and silver and brass and iron, should liken to these substances the kingdoms that held the sovereignty at different times in the life of men, but that the prophet should describe these same kingdoms under the likeness of beasts, in accordance with the manner of their rule. And the prophet, in conformity with this, does not see the kingdom which comes at the end of all these things, until he has in order described the 4 dominions mentioned under the 4 beasts. And I think that the visions shown, both to the king and to the prophet, were visions of these 4 kingdoms alone, and of none others, because by these the nation of the Jews was held in bondage from the times of the prophet. In other words, the beasts in Daniel 2 and 7 are like the soils in the parable of the sower. Israel is an example for the rest of the world. Deuteronomy 4 verses 6 through 8. Zechariah didn't give a detailed account of the throne, but he does mention the throne in the temple of the Lord in 6 verse 13. He does describe horses and chariots like the horsemen in Revelation 6. There are interesting connections between the horses and chariots in Zechariah chapters 1 and 6 and the imagery in Revelation chapters 4 through 6, particularly regarding God's throne. Both passages feature 4 horses or chariots with similar color schemes. Red, black, white, and dappled horses appear in both visions, often interpreted symbolically. In both Zechariah and Revelation, the horses and chariots are linked to the divine realm. They are seen coming from the presence of God or carrying out his will. Zechariah calls them spirits of heaven. Zechariah 6 verse 5. The use of horses and chariots in Zechariah and Revelation share symbolic elements, particularly the number and colors. While their specific functions differ, they both represent God's agency in the world. Revelation takes this imagery a step further by explicitly connecting the horsemen with the throne of God through the 4 living creatures. According to Paul, God speaks to all men through nature, Romans 1 verse 20 through 23. The mistake of men was that they fell into idolatry. So it shouldn't be too surprising that the Greeks spoke of stories similar to those in the Bible. In his book, Republic, the Greek philosopher Plato spoke of gold, silver, bronze, and iron kingdoms, as did the Latin writer Ovid in his book Metamorphoses. Plato also spoke of a composite beast in chapter 9 that represented the soul. This beast doesn't represent a literal creature, but rather the chaotic and multifaceted nature of the undisciplined soul. The many heads represent conflicting desires, emotions, and appetites that pull a person in different directions. Unlike the interpretation of beasts representing external forces, Plato's beast is internal. It represents the struggle within a person for reason and order to control the baser instincts. Both the earthly biblical beasts with multiple parts and Plato's multi-headed beast share the idea of representing something with many aspects or conflicting forces. Both can be seen as representing a threat to order or control. The earthly biblical beasts threaten God's order, while Plato's beasts threaten the order within the soul. The concept of a multi-headed creature representing complexity and the struggle for order can be found in both the Bible and Plato's Republic. Plato also penned tales involving chariots and horses. A winged charioteer pulling a chariot drawn by 2 horses is the metaphorical comparison of the human soul found in Plato's Phaedrus. The intellect, reason, or the aspect of the soul that directs the soul toward truth is represented by the charioteer. The left horse must be restrained and the chariot must be guided by the charioteer. The correct horse is a symbol of reason, morality, or the better aspect of passion. The proper horse is white with black eyes, submissive, and a supporter of humility, temperance, and honor. The left horse stands for the irrational desires, passions, or concupiscent character of the soul. Rigid and driven by passions, the left horse is ugly and terrible. Another story that can be understood as a struggle for order is Jacob's ladder in Genesis 28 verses 10 through 19. The interpretation of Jacob's ladder from the book of Genesis has varied somewhat over time and across religious traditions, but some common themes emerge. Most interpretations see the ladder as a symbol of the connection between heaven and earth, a way for humanity to communicate with the divine. For Jacob, the dream reassured him of God's presence and promises despite his current circumstances. The ladder can represent a path for spiritual development and a reminder of divine guidance. In Christianity, Jacob's ladder is often seen as a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, who acts as the mediator between God and humanity. The concept of complexity and the struggle for order can be found in both the Bible and other writings.